Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, Southern Appalachian Herbs at blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. Got a few announcements before we jump into the herbs, but of course, it would not be appropriate to start today's show without some remembrance of 9/11, of the horrible attack that happened in our country 21 years ago. I know that's very much on the news today, and if like me, you're absolutely sick of seeing the coverage of the Queen's funeral and that inbred amoral git named Charles that is now the King of England and the head of the Church of England. All right, y'all try to figure that one out. Look, I'm going to say the monarchy has jumped the shark. I honestly, I had a really immense respect for Queen Elizabeth. Right? Um, yeah, she made like some $40 million off the taxpayers of England and lived in luxury her entire life, but she did seem to have a servant's heart and was a woman of dignity. I have absolutely no respect for her sons, the pedophile and the adulterer. But hey, y'all English, if that's what you want, if you think it's worth paying this inbred bunch of morons to live in grand homes and be worshipped by the peasantry, y'all just go right ahead. Serious. My surname, of course, is Carroll. If you look at the Declaration of Independence, you'll see the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence was Charles Carroll. Not directly related, but we're all kin, as we say in the South. He was also the only one brave enough to put his address beside his name. And even though the English slaughtered his family, killed him before his eyes, confiscated his wealth, they did that most. Tucker Carlson did some special the other day talking about how benevolent the English were. Obviously, he hasn't read much history of the Irish or the American colonies. They were pretty darn brutal. And, you know, the Pilgrims didn't come to America to escape Catholicism. They came to America to be free to worship outside of the rule of the Church of England. A lot of people make that mistake. The Church of England beheaded thousands of Catholics who refused to convert to Anglicanism. I'm part English. I have no issue with the English. Uh, Great culture. I love Shakespeare, but Tucker's show was just so off the mark. It was ridiculous. I'm glad the people of India are proud that they were once British colonists, and the people of Canada are still connected with them in Australia and all that. Right on, rock on. But hey, my ancestors fought two wars to get away from them: the Revolution and the War of 1812, and of course suffered what could only be described as pure genocide that the English perpetrated on the Irish. And the Irish are the most enslaved people in the history of the world, as far as we know. The English enslaved and moved about half the population out of Ireland and tried to starve the rest of them to death, all because my ancestor did not want to recognize the king as God's representative on earth or to pay taxes to him. Taxes have always been a big issue. And anyway, but going back to 9/11, I can't watch the news coverage. I haven't been able to watch the news coverage for years. It just tears me up. It breaks my heart. I'm back, right there on that day every time I see it. And It changed my life. It changed everybody's lives, I'm sure. I mean, those who lost loved ones on those that day, they'll never be the same. And you know, I am not one that believes our government perpetrated it. I do believe we were attacked by Islamic radicals. I also believe that our FBI and CIA and other law enforcement agencies could have stopped it. Had I don't know if they didn't want to, if they allowed it to happen. Don't ask me that. I'm not going to answer that. Or if they were just plain incompetent. Maybe they were too busy going after so-called white nationalists, so the militia movement, which was their big target in the 90s, like it is parents at school boards now. Ruby Ridge, where they set up a man, an innocent man, on gun charges and then gunned down his family in cold blood. Maybe had they not been doing such as that, you know, thousands of Americans wouldn't have died, both in the towers and in the wars that followed. I would never understand why, after we won that war in Afghanistan in a matter of weeks, we didn't just pick up and leave. Why we had to spend the next 20 years empire building and invading Iraq and keeping that war going for decades longer than it should have gone, still going on, and sending our young men and women to the killing fields. Uh, I honestly have zero respect, zero respect for the Bush family. And when after 9/11, man, I thought W was doing the right thing. I supported him, and I sure don't after 20 years of losing a war that we had won and sacrificing our youth and killing thousands of civilians. But that doesn't take away from the tragedy of 9/11. It certainly changed my life, and in many ways, had it not happened, I wouldn't be here doing this today. Uh, I had family issues I could not serve. My grandmother had had a heart attack. I had to take care of her on the farm, and I did what I could, which was to support the war effort through politics. And that got me writing. That got me speaking on radio, being interviewed, talking on talk radio. And that's really how I learned to write the articles I write now, the books I write now, to do this podcast. Had 9/11 not happened, I don't know if I would have been a musician in Nashville, probably, or an economist in Washington, D.C., or a chef. I was studying three things at the time before I had to leave college and take care of my grandmother, which was right there, like a month in between that and 9/11. I was studying economics at the University of Georgia. I was taking some culinary training. I was going to go to food science and then from there on to culinary school. And I was playing music in the bars as much as I could. I was playing country music and jazz. Those have always been sort of my passions. And I had a lot of contacts and friends in Nashville. I knew people like Jimmy Capps, the great guitar player, um, Guy Clark, great songwriter, Emmylou Harris. I mean, I had the doors really wide open for me. I actually was so networked in, I actually turned down a date with one of the Dixie Chicks, by the way. She had not wigged out over the war and become an anti-American leftist yet. But yeah, I had lunch with the Dixie Chicks, and one of them was quite interested in me. And I said, I don't think so. But then tragedy hit, and life became very real in many ways for all of us. So moving on, I do have a couple of really fun announcements. All right, so speaking of, my passion in the culinary world, I love food. I've always been a big foodie, and as I've mentioned a couple of times, I've been writing a cookbook. The book is done. Yes, I wrote 220 unformatted pages in less than 3 months. I mean, it's been raining like crazy. So writing has been what I've done this summer, and I just dove into it. I'm now beginning the editing and revision process. By the time it's formatted, probably going to be about a 300-page cookbook that covers basically everything you can grow in your garden, on a homestead, a small farm. It covers wild fish and game. It covers meat and vegetables and fruits. Get into making your own condiments like ketchup and mustard, which are really fun to do. A big chapter on fermentation and pickles. Uh, Really a lot of info on fermenting. I mean, you're making your own wines and beers and such as that. Sauces. I'm part French, so I have to get in all those delicious sauces. A small chapter on desserts because sweets just really aren't my thing. But all in all, in total, this is somewhat of an encyclopedic work that is more about the technique, how to cook and how to combine flavors, how to use essential pieces of kitchen equipment, how to select quality and not pay a fortune for it, how to respect your ingredients, eat seasonally, eat good food. More about how to cook than it is about specific recipes. So when you take one of my recipes, I say, this is how you can do a dish. I mean, for instance, it could be, beef, it could be duck, it could be fish, whatever. And I say, and you can substitute this and this and that and this. And if your proportions are different, you can alter this, you can add this, you can change that. If you did this book and you work through it, and I think it'll be out October 1, that's my goal. I'm going to try to release it October 1. Uh, if you've never learned to cook, if you were not as fortunate as me growing up with a grandmother and a mother who taught you to cook, and you've never had professional cooking experience. I mean, I've catered, I've done a lot of stuff. We'll teach you how to cook. And if you're already a good cook, um, but maybe you're kind of stuck in the grocery store rut of just beef, pork, and chicken, maybe a little shrimp every now and then, turkey on the holidays. I mean, it's basically all the meats Americans eat. We've really lost the diversity in our food system. The number and variety of vegetables and fruits that are in our markets now are a fraction of what they were even just a couple of generations ago. And I've got a cookbook from 1940 that lists about 100 varieties of apples you could expect to find at the grocery store at that time. And it gives recommendations for each of those apples, which ones are good for just eating out of hand, for making pies, for making jams, for juicing, for making cider, etc. Now you go to the grocery store, you're going to see 3 or 4 types of apples. I got an interesting message the other day from a lady who said, I went to the store to buy potatoes. Only potatoes I ever bought were russet potatoes. They only had white potatoes. And I'm seeing this too. We're seeing the supply chain is messed up. When I went to the store just the other day, they had white potatoes, red potatoes, and Yukon Golds. They had no russets. She said, "What do I do with white potatoes?" Well, I told her everything you can do with white potatoes. They're they're not great for baking. They're not as starchy and as large as a russet potato, but they're excellent for boiling. They're excellent for grilling. They're excellent for so many things. Yukon and Golds actually make the best mashed potatoes, in my opinion. Most people, again, would just use russets for that. Red potatoes make just fantastic home fries or roasting them up with olive oil and rosemary. That's just one little thing. If you think about how much the variety has shrunk in our grocery store, so many people are just stuck in a rut of only using a few foods. Well, in my book, I'm giving you hundreds of ingredients, hundreds of foods, whether it's coming from your garden or you're going to the farmer's market or you're doing what I hope you're doing in this time of uncertainty and impending shortages, growing more food, growing that garden, and maybe getting into hunting and fishing and trapping. Humane trapping for meat is a very good way to put meat on the table, often of more small game and species that sportsmen, as they call themselves, do not target. Someone who's out for a trophy deer is not going to be trapping beaver, okay, or groundhog. And those are actually two delicious meats. Beaver meat is like the best grass-fed beef. They're very clean animals, and they're actually a nuisance. Cause flooding. I mean, people will actually pay you to come trap their beavers, if you get a license that allows you to do that. People that have horses will pay you to trap their groundhogs because groundhog holes cause horses to break their legs. Groundhogs are very clean vegetarian animals. Um, if beaver's a lot like beef, groundhog's a little bit more like pork. And I mean, just one example, and I know that may be extreme for some people, but trust me, I've got a ton of recipes in there for chicken. I've got a ton of chicken recipes, from soups to roast chicken to chicken dressing to fried chicken and sauce piquant, chicken a la Creole, you name it. So the if you're interested in wild foods, the wild foods are there. I've got a chapter on foraging. If you're not, you can skip those, and you still got a couple 100 pages, 250 pages of things that'll interest you. So I'll talk a lot more about that in October. And as we get closer to the release date, I enjoyed this one. I had a very good time writing this one, and I think you will enjoy it too. The other announcement is something I just started the other day on a whim, and I talked with a few people, and they got really excited about it. As an herbalist, you have to have some facility with Latin. We can always look at the name of a plant as like the common name or the folk name. And the problem is, several plants are often called by one name. I told you before, there are probably 20 some plants that are called plantain. And that's everything from the thing that looks like a green banana to the weeds in your yard, which are actually the herbs, the medicinal herbs we use, dozens of wild plants, downy rattlesnake plantain, water plantain, so many of them. They're all called plantain, but only a few of them, just a handful, are true plantain, Plantago species. Plantago is the Latin name for plantain. So unless you know a little bit of Latin, you're not going to know really the true identity of your herbs. And there's so many examples. I was talking with an herbalist friend the other day about Collius, and she assumed I was talking about Collius forscoli, which is the Collius that's used in Ayurvedic medicine. It actually has a long history of herbal use. I was not. I was talking about Collius, this is a long one, Scutellarioides, Scutellarioides, I think it's maybe the name you pronounce it. My pronunciations are never very good, but that's very important because those are two distinctly different plants. The Collius scutellarioides, or whatever, is the ornamental Collius, and it has very little documentation in herbal use. And I'm experimenting with it and finding a lot of very interesting uses for this Collius. It seems to have antispasmodic, sedative properties, helps with sleep, etc. It reduces pain, lowers blood pressure. Really interesting plant. And I'm not, as I've said before, I'm not ready to recommend it because it has not been tried enough to see if over long-term use it could be dangerous. So I'm kind of making myself a guinea pig on this one. Because of the family it's in, I think it's probably fairly safe. Most of the plants in that family are very safe, and I've been using it now for a couple of years with no ill effects, except that when the leaves are older and if you eat them fresh, they tend to irritate your throat. I have noticed that, but that's the only thing I've noticed. And it seems that making a fresh plant tincture is far stronger than making a dried plant tincture. So I'm learning all kinds of stuff about Collius, but you see, if we didn't know those Latin names, we would not know which plant we're talking about. And, other Latin names of plants will tell you whether they're useful or not as herbs. If you see a plant and it ends in officinalis or officinale, it was one of the plants used by the Benedictines and other monastic herbalists through the Middle Ages. It's part of official herbal medicine and has been for about 1,500 years or more, really longer than that. So it's very important to have some facility with Latin. Now, I did not get a chance to study Latin in school. Yes, I could have taken it in college, but I was not thinking along those lines at the time. I was too busy trying to pass Spanish with a D. I've never had any facility with Spanish for some odd reason. So I started learning Latin on my own, and I started maybe about 4 years ago. And I was using the series Wheelock's Latin. Wheelock was, well, it was actually written by a professor at the University of Georgia, so of course I grabbed that, and it's really considered the classic. It's good. It would be better to have a teacher to go through the books of Wheelock's Latin, and there's several of them. Fortunately, someone did a guide to Wheelock's Latin, which kind of helps a little bit. It's kind of heavy and it's tough, and there are other good online resources such as Quizlet and Duolingo that can help, especially build vocabulary. So, as of after 4 years of learning on my own, I'm finally getting to the point where I can kind of read Latin pretty well. I got a Latin language Bible. That's the Biblia Sacra Vulgata. It's the Latin Bible for the common. That's what Vulgata means, for the common people. And it's really cool to, read a Bible that I believe was compiled somewhere around 1100. I mean, it's really neat to see what this basically original Bible is as compared to all the modern translations that came after that. I've read many of them in English, and a lot of it is quite different. You really kind of wonder, why did someone think it was okay to cut out this entire book of the Bible or to change the words to mean something they did not mean originally? Was it just to fit their doctrine? Yeah, maybe it was. I would actually recommend every Christian learn to read Latin and get a Latin language Bible. I mean, this was published way before the King James, y'all. way before, hundreds of years before. And if you don't trust a modern translation, believe it or not, you can buy Bibles that were printed in the 1600s off of eBay. I see them come up every now and then, maybe two, three a year for a few $100s. How cool would that be to have in your house if you can afford one? A Bible that was actually written and published and used in churches, 100, 200 years before America became a nation. It's really, really incredible to hold one of these in your hands and think about it. I'm just going to say that. But whether you want to learn Latin for fun, and it actually is a fun language, it's come to me a whole lot easier than any other foreign language ever has. I'm part French and part Irish. I've tried to learn French, I've tried to learn Gaelic and failed at both. But Latin is not that hard. That's mainly because so many of the words are so similar to English words. I mean, really, you can recognize probably a third of the Latin vocabulary if you just think of how it correlates uh, to our English language that we use every day. The main part of it is the grammar and the syntax. That can be a little tricky. Oh, but anyway, as part of reading the Latin language Bible, and I got a Latin missal, I thought it would be good to start a new course in Latin. And I found a really good one. It's called, let's see, I think the full title is Scannon's, it's Latin Grammar Preparation for Reading of the Missal and the Breviary. Essentially, what this is a short course in Latin for people, for priests, monks, nuns, anybody going to religious life that needs to be able to quickly learn to have a basic facility with Latin. Now, if you're Protestant, you may think, why would I be interested in that? Well, you'd be interested in that because it's actually the easiest way I've found to learn Latin. I mean, the Scanlon's book, which was, I think, last published in the 70s, is so much easier than Wheelock's and so much easier than any other one that I found. I mean, you could just whip through these chapters probably in a third of the time, and you're learning very usable, friendly, I guess, user-friendly vocabulary, and the grammatical rules are laid out very plainly. And I really wish I had started with Scanlon's and then maybe moved on to Wheelock's or something else. When looking at this Scanlon's Latin grammar, I checked on Quizlet to see if anybody had put together any of the tutorials that they had for Wheelock's and others. Quizlet allows you to put together study guides, right? It allows you to make flashcards online, and they even set up these little automated lessons to help you learn the content that's put in there by, someone like me or someone else who's teaching a class. They have flashcards and they actually have tests. Now, as far as I know, this is as the last time I checked, and they have changed this around a few times. Flashcards are always free. I believe they have like a matching thing that's free. They allow you to do their learning, like you can go through the same class 3 times or so for free, or 5 times. It may even be five. But then if you have to pay, you have to get a membership. It's not that much. It's kind of worth it to take the tests. So no one had done that for Scanlon's. And I thought, you know what? It would help me to put these little study sets together for myself so I can flip through flashcards. Why don't I just go ahead and put them together for everybody else? So I made them public. I've got the first 3 chapters of Scanlon's on there. I'll probably add about one a week or so. If you're interested in learning Latin with me, you can get the Scanlon's book. There are actually a couple of copies available you can borrow off of archive.com. That's free. Okay. You can buy the book. Like I said, I believe the last edition was done in the 70s. There maybe have been a more recent printing in the 90s. You can probably find the book for sale used, whatever, for maybe $10 or so. Or you can go online to archive.org and just type in um, Latin grammar preparation for the reading of the Missal and the Breviary. That's Breviary, and it will pull it up. And I'm looking right here. There are like 3 copies. It looks like one of them you can download and 2 of them you can borrow for an hour at a time. So you can get the chapter and you can read it, and then you can go to Quizlet, which is quizlet.com. Type in the same thing. Type in Scanlon's Latin Grammar Preparation for the Reading of the Missal and the Breviary, and it should pull up. And if not, just type in my name, Judson Carroll, and you will see these 3 study sets I've done so far. And by this time next week, there'll probably be a 4th, and we can work through this together. If you want to communicate with me, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. Like I said, I've been studying Latin 4 years. I'm by no means an expert, but I know a lot more now than I did as a beginner, that's for sure. So anyway, that's my announcement for this week. I'll put the links in the show description, the show notes, and I'm just doing this for free. I think it's fun to learn Latin. I really think everyone should know Latin. It is really essential for an herbalist. It is really essential for anyone that works with plants. If you're into anything from horticulture to plant breeding to anything like that, botanical Latin is really important. And honestly, I think anyone who's a Christian should learn Latin because if not, how can you how can you double check that what you're being told is accurate? You know, if someone writes that this is true, right? They write down that this happened in history, or that the Bible says this, or that a certain religious figure in the past said this, and they're talking about something that's pre-English, pre-American English, certainly before they stopped using Latin in England. Um, which they did, I mean, predominantly, even through most of the last 500 years of the Anglican Church, they were still the learned and the religious people were using Latin. Latin was the universal language. It was the language of the scholarly. Well, if you're looking at anything someone's written about a Christian topic that's, say, more than 300 years old, how do you know it's true if you can't pull up the original source and double check it? And if you can't speak and read Latin, you're really just relying on someone else's translation, and they could be lying. And quite often they are, believe it or not, quite often. There are many, many things written about religious topics that are completely untrue, whether someone was doing that on purpose or they just made a mistake. I don't know. The same is true when people have tried to translate the original old manuscripts of the different books of the Bible that were written in Greek. There have been some ridiculous errors made where someone was taking a Greek language uh, chapter of the Bible and translating it just using a dictionary, where you look up this word means that. If you've ever studied any language, language doesn't work that way. You cannot do a literal translation and get the same meaning of the sentence. And there have been some really crazy ideas and kind of cult like churches propagated off of really bad translations of the Bible. And frankly, some of our good translations of the Bible are completely flawed, inaccurate. Like I said, whole books of the Bible, whole chapters cut out, and sentences changed, words cut from sentences. The words of God changed to have a different meaning that fit someone's doctrine as opposed to what Jesus actually said. So I think it's real well worth taking 5, 10 minutes a day to learn Latin, if for no other reason, just for fun. And if you're a homeschooler, you got kids at home, this Latin tutorial is very family friendly. There's nothing. Um, some of the Latin resources online really do try to promote a leftist liberal agenda. Um, there was one of the free classes I'm going through online where every married couple is a same-sex couple. Okay, I understand a lot of homeschoolers who are Christians would not wish to use that course, obviously. Um, you can use this one, and everything in there is going to be perfectly family friendly and okay, and not pushing any kind of you know unchristian leftist agenda. And like I said, if you're a Protestant and you're worried that this is something written by a Catholic for people going to the seminary, yeah, don't worry about it. They're not. It's not a very religious doctrine oriented book. It's really just about learning the language of Latin, using words that you would see in the Bible or that you would hear in common prayers. And that's one of the reasons it's so easy, so very easy when you see Gloria in Excelsis Deo. That means glory to God in the highest or in the heavens. Right? Every I think every single Christian church on earth uses that prayer and usually says it in Latin. And how many people ever stop to think, glory to God in the highest? What is that? Is that what that means? Yeah, that's actually what that means. And if you learn Latin, you're going to know it. So now let's get into some herbs. And this herb for today is a really interesting herb that is so much a part of European herbalism and not used anywhere near as much as it should be in America. It's called Elecampane. Elecampane is very commonly used in Austria and Germany and really throughout Central Europe. And it's a great lung herb. It really is a great herb for colds and congestions. And its documented use goes at least back to ancient Greece. In fact, the Latin name is Inula Helenium. Okay, Inula. Inula is the Latin name from which we get inulin. Inulin is a type of sugar that is found in the roots of Jerusalem artichokes that can cause a little stomach upset, but does not spike the blood sugar. You actually get used to eating it. Your body learns to digest inulin, and it's very good for diabetics. That kind of gives you a clue to some of the uses of this herb. But what does the other part of that Latin name, Helenium, mean? Well, that actually is one of the things that makes learning herbal history, once you understand Latin, so fun. So this herb relates to the legend of Helen of Troy, who was supposedly gathering this herb when she was abducted by Paris. Pliny stated that no day passed that the Empress Julia Augusta did not eat some of the candied root to help ease her digestion and to cause mirth. Elecampane was used as a digestive herb, but also to cause mirth. It made people happy. Dioscorides wrote in De Materia Medica, a decoction taken as a drink induces the movement of the urine and menstrual flow. The root itself, taken with syrup and honey, helps coughs, asthma, hernias, convulsions, gaseousness, and is good against the bites of venomous creatures. It's another one of those herbs that he recommended uh, for venomous bites and stings. It's another one of those herbs that was included in Theriac and one that eventually starts showing up in the Swedish bitters. And that whole tradition of these tonic herbs that originally began as anecdotes for poisons and part ended up being used against the Black Plague in the Middle Ages, and eventually became digestive bitters and stomach tonics and all that. Again, that's a fascinating history I talk of. It seems like almost every other show because so many of these herbs find themselves in these ancient formulas that go back to King Mithridates some, I don't know, 3,000 years ago. So that's another part of herbal history that is endlessly fascinating. He said the leaves boiled in wine are effective if applied to those who have sciatica. The root is good for the stomach, preserved in raisin wine. He said confectioners drying it a little and afterwards boiling it, then steep it in cold water and put it into a decoction they keep in jars for use. Pounded and taken as a drink, it is good for bloody excretions. At his time, it was commonly used in Greece, Rome, and Egypt, and he gives the names that they all used for it. He also recommended a wine specifically made from Elecampane. I think he called it something like nectarites, which probably comes from the same word as nectar, if we're looking at the where words come from, right? He said to take 5 ounces of dried elecampane root in a linen cloth and put it into 6 gallons of must. Now, must is sort of the leaves that are left over from making grape wine. And he said after 3 months, take it out. It's good for the stomach, the chest, and expels urine. It is also called medica, symphytum, uh, for Bascom. He goes on for a lot of names that they had for this wine. This wine, in the time of Dioscorides, was one of the primary medicines. By the time we get to the Middle Ages, Elecampane was really more associated with colds, flus, respiratory system issues. St. Hildegard von Bingen wrote around 1100 AD. She said that Elecampane had many beneficial powers in it. She said dry or green, it may be put in pure wine all year long. So it can be used in any form and should be infused in wine throughout the year. She said after it is shriveled in the wine and its powers have faded, it should be thrown out and replaced by new. So she was saying put the herb in the wine, steep it. Once the herb starts to look a little shriveled and old, take it out and put some more in there. So she was saying keep this wine around all the time because, as she says, one who has pain in his lungs should drink this wine in moderation every day, before and after eating. She says it carries away poisons from the lungs, suppresses migraines, and clears the eyes. But if someone drank it too frequently, it would injure him by its strength. a strong medicine, but should be used as a daily tonic. And again, this herb eventually began to be included in many, many daily tonics for immunity and digestion and etc. It's just one of those really good herbs. So Brother Aloysius, who continued with Father Nathan, Father Kunzel, and others to continue the tradition of monastic medicine and Germanic folk medicine well into the 1900s, said the root is used medicinally. He said it has a strong aromatic penetrating smell. Its sap is sour and bitter. The roots of 2 or 3 year old plants should be gathered in the autumn, finely chopped and dried in the oven. The root decoction consists of 4 to 5 teaspoons per 2 cups of water and may be used fruitfully in the treatment of leukorrhea and green sickness. Those are so-called women's ailments. Take 1 cup daily. The decoction also stimulates appetite and dissolves phlegm. It is recommended for asthma, lung complaints, flatulence, heartburn, catarrh, which is congestion, dropsy, indigestion, and irregular menstruation in young girls. It can also be applied externally for itching, eczema, and scabies. Now, this herb was also widely used in Russia and Ukraine. Igor Vilovich Zevin said, Elecampane is one of the oldest herbs in the Russian tradition. It is called Nine Powers in the Russian language, while Ukrainians know it as Wonderful Power. Apparently, the name of Elecampane, he's saying in Ukrainian, translates to Wonderful Power. He says that attests to its myriad applications. Although it is found growing wild throughout the countryside, many Russians cultivate elecampane in their gardens. References to this herb can be traced to the 17th century when the court physician to the Tsar Michael Fedorovich prescribed the herb for the Tsar and his family. In an herbal dated in 1627, states that the root of 9 powers should be crushed and mixed with raw honey and taken in the morning and evening. It will calm down coughing and expel any thick phlegm inside the throat. The same root cooked in wine and sweetened with sugar is good, and when taken internally helps people breathe easier. In England, the British herbalists were very aware of elecampane. 1500s, Gerard wrote, it is good for shortness of breath and old coughs, and for those who such as cannot breathe unless they hold their necks upright. Okay, what does that mean? If you've ever seen someone who has COPD or serious lung issues, they become somewhat hunched, kind of bent over, their chest seems to kind of cave in. In order to get a good breath, they have to stand up straight and hold their head back. They have to expand the chest. So he was saying that elecampane was good for people that had serious lung issues. It is of great virtue, both given as a medicine to be licked on, like a candy essentially, and likewise preserved, and otherwise given to purge and void out thick, tough, clammy humors. Okay, that's going to be serious congestion, old congestion, which sticks in the chest and the lungs. The root preserved is good and wholesome for the stomach, being taken after supper. It doth not only help digestion, but keepeth the belly soluble. So he's saying it helps you digest your food and prevents indigestion and stomach upset and bloating, essentially. The juice of the same boiled driveth forth all kinds of worms for the belly. And that's actually a very old use for elecampane. It was used as what we call vermifuge. And that use goes back at least to Pliny the Elder, who wrote in his 20th book, the fifth chapter. Pliny wrote a lot. These old Greeks, they wrote a lot. In his 20th book, of the fifth chapter, he said that not only was it good for driving out worms, but this root being chewed would help with loose teeth. The root of elecampane, again, Gerard is saying it was used as a counter poison, a remedy against the bitings of serpents, and good for them that are bursting, good for those that have hernias, essentially, and are troubled with cramps and convulsions. He goes on quite a bit about elecampane. I'll just try to skim it a little bit. He said it was good to heal up old skin ulcers, a powder made from the root, dried and ground into a powder. He also says good to use against sciatica and diverse passions of the hucklebone. Now, this one took a little research. It took me quite a while to find out what the hucklebone is and how it could be diversely impassioned. Well, it turns out it was sciatic pain, so don't get too excited there. Just like Dioscorides has said, apparently Galen first recommended that essentially poultices of Elecampane leaves be used on sore and aching joints and sciatic pain, which is, the pains that shoot down the legs and go all the way to the foot. It's nerve pain related to the lower back. Having had a severe back injury, I've dealt with a whole lot of sciatica, and I only wish I had known about Elecampane 20 years ago when it was absolutely debilitating. Oh, he mentions it being used as an ointment against the itch, scabies, manginess, and interestingly, this herb was also quite well known in Ireland. It's actually associated with the old Druid herbal medicine, and the Druids apparently associated Elecampane as a plant used by elves. Okay, to that either. I don't know about elves any more than I know about hucklebones. By the time John Kehoe wrote in the Botanologica Universalis Hibernica in 1735, which was reissued sometime, I guess, in the 70s, 80s or so as the Irish herbal, he had more practical uses for Elecampane than associating with elves. He says it promoted urination and menstruation, cures consumptive coughs and shortness of breath, aids digestion, alleviates pains in the joints, and made into an ointment cures itchy conditions. It is also very good for chest problems, cures most disorders of the lungs, such as difficulty or suspension of breathing, hurried respiration, and asthma. So there we find John Kehoe in 1735 giving essentially the same uses as Dioscorides some 2,000 years earlier, and the same as was used in Germany and Russia. Again, this is empirical evidence. We see the same plants being used in the same ways by people who were not necessarily associating with each other over various centuries. And that, to me, as I've said many times, is more reliable than scientific laboratory testing. Especially after the past few years of COVID vaccines and false research. I don't have that much faith at all in scientific research. It seems to always come out the way whoever's paying for the research to be done wants it to come out, doesn't it? Well, these old herbalists, especially in the monastic traditions that had vows of poverty and didn't get paid for what they didn't really have any reason to lie. And I take them at their word. I no longer take scientists and doctors at their word. They've blown their credibility, as has the National Institute of Health and Tony Fauci and Deborah Birx and that whole bunch. In my humble, if well, in my often not so humble. So, 1930s, Miss Grieve in a modern herbal went deep into the history of Elecampane. And as I say, this one goes back. I mean, it was in the eighth satire that bitter innula or Elecampane root was boiled into a delicate sauce, and Romans, after dining too richly, pined for turnips and a sauce made from that innula. And she also recounts that it took the name of Hellenium of Helena, the wife of Menelaus, who had her hands full of it when Paris stole her away into Phrygia. Another legend states that it sprang from her tears, another that Helen first used it against venomous bites, and a fourth that it took the name from the island Helena, where the plant best grew. It was a common herb used at least by the beginning of the 5th century. Saint Isidore in the 17th century mentioned innula. By the medieval times, it was part of official medicine. She said that Elecampane was frequently mentioned in the ancient Anglo-Saxon writings on medicine, and that was prior to the Norman conquest. It was called Marshallon by the Welsh physicians of the 13th century, and was generally used in medicine by the Middle Ages. It was formerly cultivated in all private herb gardens and as both a culinary and medicinal plant. As for the medicinal actions and uses, she said it was diuretic, tonic, diaphoretic, expectorant, alterative, antiseptic, astringent, and gently stimulant. It was employed by the ancients in certain diseases of women, in dropsy and skin afflictions, also called scabwort, arising from the fact that the decoction of it was said to cure sheep affected with the scab, or I'm assuming scabies or mange, some kind of skin condition, and also called horse heel because it was given to horses for skin diseases in horses. So its use was both for human and veterinary herbal medicine. She said in herbal medicine it's chiefly used for coughs, consumption, and other pulmonary complaints, being a favorite domestic remedy for bronchitis. It has been employed for many years with good results in chest infections, for which it is a valuable medicine, as for all chronic diseases of the lungs, asthma, and bronchitis. It gives relief to respiratory difficulties and assists in expectoration. Means it helps you cough the junk up. Its principal employment as a separate remedy in acute catarrhal affections, again that means congestion, and in dyspepsia attended with and in dyspepsia, which means indigestion. And she said that even in her time, the 1930s, the root was often candied and made into lozenges for whooping coughs. So even in the 1930s in London, you could have gone to your local apothecary, your chemist, your pharmacist, whatever you want to call it, and have gotten these confections, these lozenges, made with the powdered root being mixed with honey. That's simple. She said in the United States, it was highly recommended for both external use and internal administration for diseases of the skin. So, I mean, that really does cover it. I'll just kind of come up to modern use, plants for a future. Said Elecampane has a long history of its use as a medicinal herb, a gently warming and tonic herb. It is especially effective in treating coughs, consumptions, bronchitis, and many other complaints of the chest, as well as disorders of the digestive system. It is a very safe herb to use. It is suitable for the old and the young, and especially useful when the patient is debilitated. It cleanses toxins from the body, stimulating the immune and digestive systems, and treating bacterial and fungal infections. The root is alterative, anthelmintic, antiseptic, astringent, bitter, cholagogue, demulcent, diuretic, mildly expectorant, gently stimulant, stomatic, and tonic. Wow. In other words, that is one of our most useful herbs. Extract of the plant is a powerful antiseptic and bactericide, particularly effective against the organism that causes tuberculosis. The plant is sometimes recommended as an external wash for skin inflammations, varicose ulcers, but has been known to cause allergic reactions in some people. Once again, among the bitter herbs, we find a remarkably useful plant with an incredibly storied history. As I've said so many times, this is what keeps me interested in studying herbal history. I mean, we find these anecdotes, we find these colorful writers, we find all these uses for an herb, for a plant. It's basically a yellow flower, kind of similar to a wild sunflower. It's still a very popular herbal remedy, especially in Central Europe. I know Sepp Holzer grows it in the Alps. I know my friend Jolanta Wittub is very fond of Elecampane, and why not? My friend Tori up in Canada is very fond of using Elecampane in her herbal practice. And like I said, why not? It's one of the best lung herbs. It's kind of weedy. It's tough and hard to kill. You can grow it in the garden, and it's also survives many climates. It's not one that's going to be specific to any one location. And so, yeah, try to grow this one in your garden. I would definitely have some Elecampane on hand, maybe some pleurisy root, which is a member of the milkweed family, or gumweed. Those two, three herbs together would be really fantastic for any kind of chest cold, for any kind of pneumonia or pleurisy or anything where you need to get inflammation and mucus up out of the lungs and help the breathing. And again, these are free. These are the plants God gives us for free, and there's absolutely no reason not to use them. And especially when we have these, viruses like COVID and even the flu going around that really hit people's lungs hard. This little bit of knowledge could save your life. It could save the lives of your family. It could save the lives of your children, your neighbors. And it's not only, a whole lot safer than pharmaceuticals, but again, free. All you need is a little bit of knowledge. And that's what inspires me to keep doing this. Not only do I enjoy learning about the herbs, but I see it as almost a mission. Like in the Blues Brothers, where they say we're on a mission from God to play blues and R&B. Well, that's not my mission. My mission is to tell people about herbs so that they can use them. I mean, like I said, this is one of those that can literally save your life. So y'all have a great week. Like I said, much more to talk about in the weeks to come about the new book. I'm so excited about it. And the other free thing I'm offering is now free, I guess, online tutorials in Latin or study aids, study guides to help you learn Latin. So you'll have access to information. Isn't it amazing that here in the internet age, where we have access to more information at the tips of our fingers than any of our ancestors have ever had combined in the entire history of the world, in the entire history of the world, we still need to learn an ancient language to get accurate information because without it, we can be so easily misled. I had a very contentious debate with someone just this past week. If they had the original sources at hand, would not believe so many of the crazy bigoted things they were spouting. And I was giving them the links and they wouldn't even read it. Well, that's willful ignorance. But many of us who are not willfully ignorant still suffer from a great deal of ignorance simply because we don't have the ability to read those original sources. So, I mean, whether you're interested in ancient history or philosophy or religion, or your interest is herbs and botanicals, plant breeding, gardening, whatever, I cannot stress how important it is just to have a modicum, just a slight facility with Latin so that you know what you're saying and what you're reading and the plants you're putting in your body really are what you believe them to be. So again, y'all, my stuff, the new Latin tutorials are on Quizlet, and that book, Scanlan's Latin Grammar and Vocabulary, is on archive if you can't find it any other way. Enjoy it. Give me some feedback on it. Ask me questions about it. I'll be glad to help you in any way you can. As you all know, I'm almost always available by email. I'm on most social media, and I spend a lot of my time answering people's questions, and I feel that it's a privilege to do so. It's not imposing upon me in any way to ask me a question. And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer. I'm not going to BS you either. So, y'all, as I usually say on like Memorial Day and certain important days of remembrance, on this September 11th, I'm going to say once again, be the people, be the people who would make those who died, who sacrificed their lives for us, proud, who would make them feel that their sacrifice was worthy. And I will talk with you next week.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.